Hello, welcome back. This is week 6 of class. So we're gonna go on to chart number 4. We're gonna try and tackle one of these a week. And this is found on my iLearn page under chapter 6, chart 4. Okay. So the first abbreviation, DHHS, it's all capitals. This is the Department of Health and Human Services. So they are technically responsible for the health and well-being of the people within that region. So it's part of the government, and it's kind of in Michigan separated into counties. And each county is supposed to offer these services to its residents. So for those who cannot help themselves directly, whether they don't know what kind of resources would help them, or maybe they don't have insurance to be able to get services that they would need to survive, Department of Health and Human Services is there for that. DIFF with a capital D. This is a differential white blood cell count. So you have different types of white blood cells. Different white blood cells serve different purposes. They all fight pathogens of some sort, but you want a wide variety, and you need a certain normal amount of each one. If it's elevated, that means that your body is fighting a specific type of bacteria or pathogen. And the doctor will order a differential white blood cell count for that. DIL, this is for dilute or dissolve. When you work in medicine, it's going to happen at times where you need to dilute medication, whether it's too corrosive the way it is, or maybe it needs to be delivered in a smaller amount over a longer period of time, in which case it may be dissolved into, say, a liter bag of saline. All right. DM, both capital, this is the abbreviation for diabetes mellitus. So when somebody says they have diabetes and they can't control their sugar, this is what they mean. They have diabetes mellitus. There's two types. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 DM is insulin dependent, meaning they have to inject themselves with a hormone called insulin whenever they eat. And then the second one is type 2, and that's where they can control their sugar with diet, exercise, and or pills. Okay. DMD, this is a doctor of dental medicine. So this is your dentist, and it's kind of like the MD for physicians. When somebody goes to dental school, this is the degree they will get. DMS, I attached into iLearn another video specifically for diagnostic medical sonography. So this is the act of using sound waves in order to generate a picture or a visual of some sort. So it's important in many different walks of medicine, like looking at if your blood vessels are corroded or blocked up with plaques, or what gender a baby is, that kind of stuff. So I put a video just for that into iLearn. Next is deoxyribonucleic acid. This is your DNA. This is all of the genetic material is roped in your DNA. Okay, when your cells go through mitosis or meiosis, which is cell division, this DNA is actually replicated and split into two separate cells. DNR, this is a do not resuscitate, and I do have a really good example of this. Let me see here. Google Chrome. Why is it not pausing? Google Chrome, here we go. All right, so for do not resuscitate, this means that in the event that they are not able to sustain their own life, They can, while they're living and coherent, those are very important things, right? While they're living and coherent, they're able to decide if they want resuscitation or not. Some people really don't. A lot of times CPR can render bodies a little mutilated because compressions can break their bones. You know, the providers may attempt multiple IVs or interosseous lines, which go into the bone. They could try multiple airway techniques. It can be not the most dignity-filled for the potential decedent. And some people just would rather, if they die naturally, they just want to die naturally, right? Not to impede on that. So they can have whatever reasoning that they want. They can sign this. So a DNR, a do not resuscitate, is a very legal thing. So every state can have their own forms. Lawyers can make their own forms. Ultimately, what it needs to ultimately say is what the patient wants. It has to have witnesses. It has to have a physician sign it. All sorts of that. So it's very, very legal. So all that's terminology up here, but here's your actual do not resuscitate order. It says, I have discussed my health status with my physician, so-and-so. I request that in the event my heart and breathing should stop, no person shall attempt to resuscitate me. This order is in effect until it is revoked by me. Being of sound mind, I voluntarily execute this order, and I understand its full import or its full meaning. Okay, so the person has to sign it and print. The physician has to sign it. Then you have witnesses that have to sign it. Okay. So that is your DNR. Now, there's other forms, and I want to stress that there's no one single form for a DNR. I don't think I've seen the same form more than a couple times on my patients. It's generally they each have their own type that has been drawn up by somebody. So this one in Massachusetts, I wanted to pull this up as an example that they can choose what they want and what they don't want. So they could choose to have resuscitation attempts with ventilations or medications, right? So here, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Do not resuscitate or attempt resuscitation. For ventilation, so if they're in respiratory distress where it is it's necessary to deliver some sort of procedure or medication, okay, they may not want to be intubated or ventilated. They may only want non-invasive ventilation, like a CPAP, right? They don't want a tube shoved down their throat. Or they may choose not to have non-invasive ventilation and not be intubated or ventilated. So, I've also seen these where they can choose to have intravenous medications given. They can, they can refuse certain aspects of CPR, right? So it's kind of completely up to them, to be quite honest. So there's all these different ways that patients can speak for themselves in the event that they can't at that point in time. And they do that through do not resuscitate orders, also advanced directives. Okay. A DO, this is a doctor of osteopathic medicine. When students that are graduating from their undergraduate program and they're applying to med school, they can apply to an MD program, which is a medical doctorate, or they can apply to a DO program. They're kind of tomato for the most part. There's only a handful of differences between the two programs, but ultimately they're both able to do the same thing. They're both able to treat their patients, have their own patient load. They're able to specialize if they want to specialize in gynecology or obstetrics or family medicine, or if they want to be a psychiatrist, right? An MD and a DO both can they have equivalencies with what they're able to do with their degree. DOA, this is dead on arrival. So on an ambulance, when I get called for a cardiac arrest, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a DOA. 9 times out of 10, I'm not even going to be able to do CPR because it's not going to be indicated. This happens a lot if somebody passes in their sleep and they're not found until the next morning and they've been potentially hours without breathing and without a pulse. At that point in time, there's no way that we would medically be able to resuscitate them. All right. Or if you have a patient that happens to go into cardiac arrest, and say there's an ice storm or a snowstorm, and it takes, especially out where I work, it can take, on a normal day in good conditions, it could take me 25 or 30 minutes to get to somebody's house. And it could take me 45 minutes to an hour to respond to that person's house. If nobody else is there doing CPR, ultimately when we get there, they would be dead on arrival. They would not be eligible for resuscitation. DOB, this is a date of birth. This is when you're born, right? So this is important to go on birth certificates. If you have a death certificate, you will also have a date of birth on their death certificate. Okay, so date of birth is what we go by to tell how old somebody is. DOD, this is date of death. This is the date that somebody dies. Right, goes on a death certificate. It has to be reported to the state every time this happens. DON, this is capital DON, Director of Nursing. With Director of Nursing, this is a title, so it's always going to be uppercase. This is the person that oversees an entire nursing department of a clinic or a hospital, something like that. Then we have DPM. This is a doctor of podiatric medicine, doctor of podiatric medicine. This is a foot doctor. So POD, when it's POD, this means foot. Okay. If you were to see PED, which a lot of people get pediatric and podiatric confused, pediatric with a PED is a children's doctor. All right. Podiatric means they specialize in the feet. So a DPM. All right. And then we'll get into diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus on the next video.